Okay, now we've gone through most of the understanding financial statements lesson. You've seen the introductory lesson. We took you through some in-depth explanation of income and the different sources of income and the different categories of income. Then we've gone through the expenses, where I've shown you the rules of thumb for the expenses, the expense ratio discussion, and now obviously we're going to talk about the net operating income and how we calculate out the value of a multifamily property. It's all based upon a formula. If the formula works, you buy it. If the formula doesn't work, you don't buy it. All right, now it all comes down to the net operating income and the cap rate. And I'm going to explain the cap rate in this particular video. Net operating income is nothing more than the income that we talked about in video 2 minus the expenses that we talked about in video 3. That gives you the net operating income. Now you need to understand the cap rate, the capitalization rate. Once you understand how that concept works, you will understand the valuation of multifamily. It will all become very, very clear to you. So the name of this particular lesson is Understanding the Power of the Cap Rate. And you're going to see in just a moment exactly what I mean. And I'm going to put it in a story format. And it's all going to become very clear to you. And I use this particular lesson in my seminars, and people's eyes open up. They said, oh, now I get it. And when you understand this and understand exactly how this works, you will understand why multifamily is a phenomenal investment and why you've got to get one of these yourself. So let's get started. I'm going to take you through a PowerPoint presentation, and then you're going to see why we're doing what we're doing. It's all going to become very, very clear. All right, folks, watch this video, and that's going to be it for this month. Well, remember next month we're making offers. It's time to make offers. So get ready, take great notes, and get ready to learn a ton, because next month we're in the business. All right, I'll talk to you soon. Okay, this final video is our way of bringing everything that you've learned so far in this particular masterclass lesson in for a landing, tying it all together so you totally understand how these numbers interact. Now, there is what I call the Holy Trinity. I know there are other people that have their own Holy Trinity. This is my Holy Trinity. You've got the purchase price, the cap rate, and the net operating income. Those three numbers are all interrelated, and I'm going to show you how in just a moment. Up to this point, we've looked at the income, all the categories of the income. We've looked at the expenses, all the different categories for expenses. When you subtract the expenses from the income, you end up with the net operating income. All right? That is one of the three variables in this Holy Trinity. So we calculate the NOI based upon what our rules of thumb are and what the seller is giving us for information. Once we have that number, then we can start looking at the other number, which is the cap rate. And I'm going to show you how all of this interrelates and how important and powerful this cap rate really is. So first thing we need to do is to give you an understanding of the definition of cap rate. It's actually the capitalization rate. Now listen to the way I read this definition and listen to where I stress certain words. The cap rate is a rate of return on a real estate investment property based upon the expected income that the property will generate. Capitalization rate is used to estimate the investor's potential return on his investment. As you can see, expected, estimate are, in my opinion, the two most important terms that you need to grasp out of here. They are not set in stone. If the seller is telling you that he's selling this thing at a 6.5 cap, well, maybe it's a 7 cap. Maybe it's only maybe it's a 6 cap. You as an investor need to understand what the cap rate is for a particular property that you're looking to buy in a particular market. The cap rate will vary based upon the quality of the asset and the marketplace that you're in. When you're looking at cap rates in the Boston area for a Class A property, you're looking at very low cap rates, 2%. If you're looking at South Dallas, all right, that's a war zone. You better only be looking at cap rates in the north of 10%, 14% cash on cash, not cash on cash, 14% cap rate. It all depends upon the geographical location and the quality of the asset. And because you are working within a geographical area and you're looking for a particular type of asset, you should know as an investor what cap rate those properties tend to generate. Okay? So here's the Holy Trinity. This is how they all interrelate. It's all about algebra. And you listen to your seventh graders say, why do I need algebra? I'll never use it again in my life. Well, we use algebra all the time in multifamily. And here it is, right here. This is the equation. Remember, we just solved for the net operating income. We have calculated our own analysis. We've done our own analysis for the net operating income, and we have one of the three variables. Now, because we are investors in that particular marketplace, we know what type of asset we're looking for. We know what the cap rate should be for this particular asset. So right away, we know two of the three variables. And in algebra, when you know two out of the three, you can always solve for the third, right? So what we're trying to solve for is what the actual purchase price should be on this property. Now, if any of you have read any of my blogs or followed some of my articles, you know that I wrote one that got a lot of play. The biggest lie in multifamily is the asking price. And it is because the seller has a price in mind, and then he will manipulate the two other variables to back into that purchase price. And it's your job to keep him honest and make sure that those numbers are accurate. And that's why we went through the whole exercise of understanding the financial statements, so that you can find out where he's going to be fudging those numbers. So once we have the NOI and we know the cap rate, we know what the purchase price should be. We know what our offer should be. And you'd be amazed at how many times I've seen some brokers try to manipulate the cap rate in order to get a particular purchase price. Like, they'll actually take a war zone property and apply an A-class cap rate to it in order to justify the purchase price. And you sit down with the broker and say, what are you talking about? Are you trying to tell me that this property is a 4 cap? Well, it could. And you just hear him start to do his dance. And you're like, no, this thing is a 10 cap. And if this is a 10 cap, let's apply a 10 cap number into this formula along with the NOI that you gave us. And there's what the purchase price should be, Mr. Broker, not what you're asking. So by just sticking to the numbers and understanding how these numbers work and how you can control the numbers, you can control the argument and the discussion as to what your offer should be. All right, now let's put a face in the cap rate. Let me kind of give you an overview here. Think about it this way. You are out there looking to syndicate a deal. That means that you're going out there to try to raise private money in the marketplace. And everyone that has private money looking to invest is having their doors beaten down by every possible investment house around. You're going to be competing against Fidelity. You're going to be competing against New York Life. You're going to be competing against MetLife. You're going to be competing against every financial advisor out there. They all want your grandmother to invest with them and not with you. So they come along with different types of investments that she can put her money in. Government bonds, blue chip, and I use that term loosely, seeing it's General Motors here, blue chip corporate bonds or junk bonds, all depending upon what grandma is comfortable with. Now, grandma, she's very, very conservative. She only wants government bonds. She wants the safety and security of the government bonds. And once again, I have to laugh because who knows what that means nowadays. But right now, when I put this video together, government bonds are trading at about 1.43%. It had a coupon rate of 1.43%. That's all you were getting on a government bond, but it was safe and it was secure. Well, if grandma wanted a little bit more, she could move into the blue chips. General Motors at one time probably was a blue chip, but not when this video was made. But she could move into the blue chip stock bonds and get a better return at about 4.5%. Or if she really wanted to get aggressive with some of her money, she can look at the old Mike Milken junk bonds, which right now approximately are about 7.25%. Okay, so that's your competition right there. Those are the three types of financial vehicles that the financial advisors out there are recommending for grandma. And those are the types of returns that grandma can get on those types of bonds. Now, you've got to compete against those numbers. So what are you going to do? What are you going to offer grandma? Well, in the alternative, for real estate, multifamily investing, here's what you can offer grandma. That property on the left is an 8-unit property in San Francisco, one of the hottest real estate markets in the country. And the cap rate on that property is 2.85%. That is a, believe it or not, it doesn't look that way right now, but that's a Class A property in a Class A area. That is safe. That's a very safe and very secure real estate investment for grandma. That will compare nicely to a government bond. So she can have 1.4, whatever we just said a moment ago, or she can get a cap rate of 2.85%. So that's what grandma is looking at with her money, and when she's competing against the government bond salesperson. Now, the property in the middle is a Class B property. It's look at it. It's 1980s construction, pitched roof, separate entrances, individually metered, all the things I like to look for in a property. And the cap rate, and these are all California properties. The cap rate on this particular property is 4.5%. So that number is going to compare against your blue chip bonds. And remember, those are trading about 4%. So that's your competition here. Now, in the fact that it's California, is supposedly a safer real estate market. Typically on the coasts, you're going to see lower cap rates. So that number has to compete against the blue chip bonds that the financial advisors are selling. And then the property way on the right is a C-class property. It's older. It's 1970s. Look at it. It's tired. It's flat roofs. It looks like it's it hides right below the they're all built. These are the styles built in the 50 out in the desert. And this particular cap rate is trading at 6.6%. So these are the cap rates and the style of property that are going to compete against those bonds that you're in competition with. So that's how we as investors use the cap rate to help other investors who are looking to put money into our property understand the value of our deal. Okay, does that make sense to you? Now let me explain to you the trick. And this is where you really need to understand, okay? Meet Grandpa. Grandpa has owned an apartment building for 20 years. 20 years ago, he sat in one of my seminars, not really. 20 years ago, he sat in someone's seminar and learned about apartment investing. He was a successful business person. He owned his own business. He knew that he had to start putting money away for retirement. And he figured the best way to do it was to buy an apartment building. So 20 years ago, that's exactly what he did. Very wise man. 20 years later, he has paid off the mortgage, and that thing just provides an income for him all the time. But now he's ready to move on. Now he's starting to put his life together. He's just picked up the fourth wife, and she doesn't like to be a landlord. She wants to go around and travel, and she wants to get rid of this property. So he wants to sell it, but what he wants to do is he wants to put it in a trust for his grandchildren. Little Johnny here, he wants to leave the million, whatever he wants to make on this property, to Johnny. Now here's the problem. This guy has one chance to maximize his ownership for those 20 years. He has one chance to sell it to someone at the highest price. He doesn't get a do-over. He has to max out that number, and all of that money goes into a trust for little Johnny. So what's he going to do? He's going to go to a broker, and he's going to say, I want to sell my property. And the broker's going to say, well, what was your NOI? And then he's going to say, what difference does it make? I want $1 million. No. I need to know what your I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead a little bit here. He says, what was your NOI? He says, $100,000. is, all right, let me go back to my office, let me do some research, and I'll tell you what I can do for you. So he goes back with the NOI. The broker sits down. Broker knows right away. He looks at the market, though, and he says, okay, this type of asset right now is trading in the marketplace at a 10 cap. So if we already know the NOI and we know the cap rate, what should the asking price be based upon the formula? $1 million. So the broker goes back to Grandpa and says, okay, we can sell your property for $1 million. That's what it's worth. And Grandpa hits the roof. He says, no, that's unacceptable. I need to make more than that. I want to put $1 million in the bank for little Johnny. And after I pay the broker commission and after I pay all these other things, I won't net $1 million. I need to walk away with $1 million. You need to fix this, Mr. Broker. You need to get me my $1 million. How are you going to do it? Well, what they do is they start to manipulate the financials. They start to do things that they haven't done before in this property in order to get the numbers to look like they have to justify a higher sales price. How to do that?
Well, what happens if it increases the income by 10%? And what happens if he reduces the expenses by 10%? And you might be saying, well, how can he do that? Just that quickly, how can he do it? Listen, he only has to do it for 90 days. And here's how he does it. He starts to rent to sex offenders and drug addicts. He gets his occupancy up to almost 100%. Because now, once the word gets out that this property rents to felons, every felon in town is going to be knocking on his door. And he will have this place leased up in no time flat. And within 90 days, he will be able to show an increase in his income by 10%. And then it becomes your problem. All of these sex offenders are now your sex offenders. But he got his income up, which is what he needed to do. Now, how can he reduce his expenses by 10%? Oh, that's simple. Just don't pay your bills. Report your financials on a cash basis and don't pay your bills. Your expenses will drop significantly. Or if a tenant calls up and says, hey, I got a termite problem, tell the tenant to leave out some traps. Don't call an exterminator. If the tenant calls up with a problem, something needs to be fixed, he says, yeah, we'll get around to it. Don't spend the money. That's how you can reduce your expenses. So overnight, within a 90-day period, this guy can reduce his expenses by 10% and increase his income by 10%. And what happens to the purchase price? It goes up to $1.2 million. Now remember, what he did here is not going to hurt him. It's going to hurt you. Not only in the reduced quality of the customers that are using your business, but also the fact that the problems that don't get fixed on his watch become your problems when you take over the property. And so your budget for having to fix these things goes up. So that is part of the problem when you see when these older, I won't say it's got nothing to do with the age, when these sellers are trying to maximize their sales price so that one chance that they have of maximizing their profit is not lost. All right? So that $1.2 million sales price now becomes a $200,000 kiss in the mail for little Johnny. Okay, think about that for a second. And this is where I want you to totally get it. Where does that $200,000 come from? It comes from your children. Your kids are the ones paying that $200,000 to little Johnny here. How does that make you feel? Does that make you feel vigilant about making sure that you never overpay for a property? You don't want your kids to pay this kid $200,000. So when you understand how the NOI can be manipulated, when you understand the impact that that cap rate has on just little changes like a 10% increase in income or a 10% reduction in expenses, you will look at these numbers entirely differently. And you will know, hey, $200,000 increase, I want that money. I want to be able to maximize on that. So that is how these sellers will do everything they can to get the best price possible
And just remember, folks, it all comes out of your kids' pockets. That's the way I look at these things. I do all of my investments on behalf of my kids. So this is the way I look at it. Okay, I hope that was helpful to you. I hope that you now understand how all of these numbers come together. And now you get a full picture. And if you think we've covered a lot, we absolutely have. And you now have to, this is not the type of thing that you're going to understand in a weekend. It's not the type of thing that you're going to understand from a home study course. You have to now take everything that you've learned on these 4 videos and apply them on a regular basis. Try it. Use the cash flow analyzer. Stick in the numbers. See how the numbers look. Manipulate the numbers. Get it to work for you. And then next month, we're going to start making offers. And that is going to be a blast. You're going to see how it's done, and you're going to see that it's not hard to do. You just need to do it. All right, folks, I hope this was helpful. I know it was. It was a blast talking to you about this, and I will see you all next month. Thank you.